Over 5 years, Joel Rifkin evaded capture while using the streets of Long Island, New Jersey, and New York City as his hunting grounds. However, once apprehended, it did not take long for law enforcement to obtain his confession to the murders of 17 women. Will Rifkin, the formative years. Born on January 20th, 1959, Joel Rifkin was adopted 3 weeks later by Ben and Jane Rifkin. Ben pursued a career as a structural engineer, while Jane dedicated herself to homemaking and gardening. The family initially resided in New City, a quaint village within Clarkstown, New York. When Joel turned 3 years old, the Rifkins expanded their family through the adoption of a daughter named January. Following several relocations, they ultimately established their home in East Meadow, Long Island, New York. Adolescence. During his formative years, Joel Rifkin exhibited an unremarkable persona. He was a notably shy child who faced challenges in forming friendships. Academically, Joel's performance consistently fell short of expectations. This underachievement was a source of disappointment to his intellectually active father, who also served actively on the school council. Despite having an IQ of 128, Joel's academic scores suffered due to undiagnosed dyslexia. Unlike his athletically adept father, Joel struggled with physical coordination and was frequently accident-prone. Upon entering middle school, Joel continued to grapple with social integration. He often seemed ill at ease within his own body during this period of growth and development. Due to his towering height, elongated facial features coupled with an atypical frame and eyeglasses, he became a frequent target for ridicule and bullying among peers. Over time, he even became the focus of amusement for some brighter students as well. Upon entering middle school, Joel continued to struggle with forming friendships. He became an insecure adolescent who appeared ill at ease within his skin. His towering height, elongated facial features, distinctive frame, and eyeglasses rendered him a frequent target for ridicule and bullying from his peers. Over time, he was perceived as the boy whom even the more socially adept students felt compelled to tease. High school. During his high school years, Joel faced increasing difficulties. He was nicknamed the Tortoise due to his appearance and slow, unsteady walk. This led to intensified bullying. Despite never being confrontational and seemingly taking everything in stride, Joel increasingly isolated himself with each passing year. His peers made no sincere attempts to engage him socially, except when they intended to play cruel pranks on him, such as hitting him with eggs, pulling down his pants in front of girls, or dousing him as he headed toward the school's restroom facilities. Joel started to avoid other students by arriving late for class and leaving the last to leave after the abuse culminated in beatings. He was alone in his bedroom most of the time, isolating himself. There, the violent sexual fantasies that had been simmering inside of him for years started to amuse him. Rejection. Rifkin had a passion for photography, and with the new camera gifted to him by his parents, he decided to join the yearbook committee. His responsibilities included providing photographs of graduating students and various school activities. However, despite Rifkin's earnest efforts to gain acceptance among his peers, this endeavor was thwarted when his camera was stolen shortly after he joined the group. Determined nonetheless, Joel chose to remain on the team and dedicated much of his free time to meeting yearbook deadlines. When the project was completed, the committee organized a wrap-up party. Unfortunately, Joel was not invited. This exclusion proved devastating for him. Angry and embarrassed, Joel returned to his bedroom and immersed himself in true crime novels about serial killers. He became fixated on the Alfred Hitchcock film Frenzy, which he found sexually stimulating, particularly scenes depicting women being strangled. By this point, his fantasies were always centered on rape, sadism, and murder as he incorporated murders he saw on screen or read about in books into his fantasy world. College experience. Rifkin eagerly anticipated his college years, viewing them as an opportunity for a fresh start and the chance to forge new friendships. However, his high expectations often waned when confronted with reality. Enrolled at Nassau Community College on Long Island, Rifkin commuted to classes in a car generously provided by his parents. The experience of living in a dormitory or off-campus presented its challenges. He frequently grappled with feelings despite being surrounded by peers. Once again facing what appeared to be a friendly environment, Rifkin found himself descending into deeper levels of discontent. Engagement in risky behavior. Rifkin soon began frequenting city areas notorious for prostitution. As a naturally shy and introverted individual who struggled with making eye contact even at school, he surprisingly mustered the courage to approach prostitutes and solicit sexual services from them. This marked the beginning of Rifkin's dual existence, one where he maintained the outward appearance known by his family while secretly indulging in behaviors centered around sex workers that consumed much of his thoughts. For Rifkin, these interactions brought manifestations of long-held fantasies and evolved into an incessant addiction that interfered significantly with various aspects of his life, causing him to miss classes and work responsibilities while depleting whatever money he had available. These relationships temporarily boosted his self-esteem, as it was perhaps the first time women showed him attention, which only further entrenched this destructive cycle. Rifkin initially left college, enrolled in another institution, and subsequently withdrew once more. He repeatedly alternated between living independently and returning to his parents' home after leaving school. This pattern of behavior exasperated his father, leading to frequent and intense disagreements regarding Joel's perceived lack of commitment to completing higher education. The passing of Ben Rifkin. In 1986, Ben Rifkin was diagnosed with cancer and subsequently took his own life the following year. Joel Rifkin delivered a poignant eulogy, reflecting on the profound love and support his father offered him throughout his life. In reality, Joel harbored feelings of inadequacy and believed he had been a source of disappointment to his father. However, with his father's passing, he found himself liberated from the perpetual anxiety that his clandestine lifestyle might come to light. First murder incident. In the spring of 1989, Joel Rifkin experienced a turbulent period characterized by an unsuccessful attempt at college, leading him to increasingly spend his leisure time with prostitutes. During this time, his violent fantasies against women intensified. In early March of that year, while Rifkin's mother and sister were away on vacation, he made a pivotal decision that would alter his life's trajectory. He traveled to New York City, where he engaged the services of a prostitute and subsequently brought her back to his family residence. Throughout her stay, the woman alternated between sleep and heroin use, a behavior which frustrated Rifkin as he did not incline drugs himself. In an unprovoked outburst of violence, he seized a blunt instrument and repeatedly struck her head before proceeding to choke and strangle her until she ceased breathing. Following this brutal act, confirming that she was deceased, Rifkin went to bed. After 6 hours of sleep, Rifkin awoke and began the task of disposing of the body. First, he extracted her teeth and scraped fingerprints from her fingers until they were unrecognizable. Then, using an X-Acto knife, he was able to cut the body into 6 pieces, which he distributed throughout Long Island, NYC, and NJ. In New Jersey, a woman's severed head was found in a paint bucket on a golf course. Because Joel Rifkin had removed her teeth, identifying her proved challenging at the time. Upon learning of the discovery, Rifkin became alarmed and anxious about potential apprehension. In his state of panic, he vowed to himself that this would be an isolated incident and committed not to kill again. It wasn't until 2013 that DNA analysis finally identified the victim as Heidi Balch. Second murder. The promise not to kill again lasted approximately 16 months. In 1990, his mother and sister moved out of town. Rifkin took advantage of having the house to himself by picking up a prostitute named Julia Blackbeard and transporting her home. After spending the night together, Rifkin drove to an ATM to get money to pay her, only to discover he had no balance. He returned home and hit Blackbeard with a table leg, strangling her to death. In his basement, he dismembered the body and placed the various parts in concrete-filled buckets. He then drove to New York City and dumped the buckets into the East River and the Brooklyn Canal. After killing the second woman, Rifkin did not vow to stop killing, but rather realized that dismembering bodies was an unpleasant task that he needed to reconsider. He was out of college, living with his mother, and working as a lawn caretaker. He tried to start a landscaping business and rented a storage unit for his equipment. He also used it to temporarily conceal the bodies of his victims. In early 1991, his company failed, leaving him in debt. He was able to get some part-time jobs, which he frequently lost because they overlapped with what he enjoyed most, strangling prostitutes. He also gained confidence in his ability to avoid being caught. More victims. Beginning in July 1991, Rifkin's murders became more frequent. Allow me to tell you about some of his victims. Barbara Jacobs, 31, was murdered on July 14, 1991. Her body was discovered inside a plastic bag that had been placed in a cardboard box and dumped in the Hudson River. Mary Ellen DeLuca, 22, was killed on September 1, 1991, when she complained about having sex after Rifkin bought her Coke. Jane Doe was murdered in early December 1991. Rifkin strangled her during sex, stuffed her body into a 55-gallon oil drum, and dumped it in the East River. Jenny Soto, aged 23, was strangled to death on November 16, 1992. The following day, her body was found floating in Harlem. Tiffany Bresciani, 22, was Joel Rifkin's final victim. On June 24, 1993, he strangled her and placed her body in his mother's garage for 3 working days before he had a chance to dispose of it. The discovery of the crime by Rifkin. In the early hours of Monday, June 28, 1993, at approximately 3 a.m., Joel Rifkin resorted to using Noxema on his nose to mask the overwhelming odor emanating from the body of Bresciani. He subsequently placed Bresciani's body into the bed of his pickup truck and proceeded southbound on the Southern Expressway towards Millville Republican Airport with the intention of disposing of it. During this time, state troopers Deborah Spagarin and Sean Rue and observed that Rifkin's truck was missing its license plate. When they attempted to initiate a traffic stop, Rifkin disregarded their instructions and continued driving. Despite employing sirens and loudspeakers, there was no compliance from him. While seeking additional support and as Rifkin tried to correct a misturn, he collided with a utility light pole. Rifkin emerged uninjured from the collision but was immediately handcuffed by troopers Spagarin and Ruan. It soon became apparent why he had failed to pull over. An unmistakable stench indicative of a decomposing body filled the air. Upon further investigation, Tiffany's body was discovered in his possession. During subsequent interrogation sessions, Rifkin explained that Tiffany had been engaged as a prostitute for sexual services when an altercation ensued, resulting in her death. He revealed his intentions were directed towards disposing her remains at Millville Republican Airport. At one point during questioning, Rifkin inquired whether he should engage legal counsel. Rifkin was transported to the police headquarters in Hempstead, New York. Following a brief interrogation by investigators, he began to divulge that the discovered body was merely an indication of a larger situation. He subsequently revealed the number 17. Looking for Rifkin's victims. A search of Raven's bedroom at his mother's house yielded a slew of evidence against him, including women's driver's licenses, underwear, jewelry, bottles of women's prescription medications, purses, pictures of women, makeup, hair accessories, and women's clothing. Many of the items can be associated with victims of unsolved homicides. There was also a large collection of books on serial killers and pornographic films with sadistic themes. In the garage, they discovered 3 ounces of human blood in a wheelbarrow, blood-painted tools, and a chainsaw with blood and human flesh embedded in its blades. Meanwhile, Joel Rifkin was compiling a list for investigators of the names, dates, and locations of the 17 women he had murdered. His memories were not perfect, but 15 of the 17 victims were identified through his confession, evidence, missing reports, and the discovery of unknown bodies over time. Trial in Nassau County. Joel Rifkin's mother initially retained a lawyer to represent him, but Joel subsequently dismissed this attorney and engaged 2 new legal representatives, Michael Suchnick and John Lawrence. Suchnick, a former Nassau County District Attorney, was well regarded as a distinguished criminal defense attorney. In contrast, his partner Lawrence lacked experience in criminal law. Rifkin faced arraignment in Nassau County for the murder of Tiffany Bresciani, to which he entered a plea of not guilty. During the suppression hearing that commenced in November 1993, Suchnick sought unsuccessfully to overturn Rifkin's confession and admission regarding Tiffany Bresciani's murder on the basis that state troopers lacked probable cause for searching the vehicle. 2 months subsequent to the hearing, Rifkin was presented with an offer, 46 years to life imprisonment contingent upon pleading guilty to 17 murders. However, Rifkin declined this deal, convinced that his attorneys could secure his acquittal through an insanity defense strategy. Throughout the 4-month hearing, attorney Suchnick frequently disrupted proceedings by arriving late or failing to attend altogether, often coming unprepared. These actions greatly frustrated Judge Wexner, who in March decided to conclude the hearings prematurely. He declared that sufficient evidence had been presented to deny the defense's motions and ordered the trial to commence in April. In response to this development, Rifkin discharged Suchnick, but retained Lawrence as his counsel despite it being Lawrence's first criminal case. The trial commenced on April 11, 1994. Rifkin entered a plea of guilty because of temporary insanity. However, the jury did not concur and found him guilty of murder and reckless endangerment. Consequently, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Rifkin was transferred to Suffolk County to stand trial for the murders of Evans and Marquez. An effort to suppress his confession was once again unsuccessful. Ultimately, Rifkin entered a guilty plea and received an additional 2 consecutive sentences of 25 years each. Comparable proceedings took place in Queens and Brooklyn. By the conclusion of these cases, Joel Rifkin, recognized as New York's most prolific serial killer, had been convicted of murdering 9 women and was sentenced to a cumulative total of 203 years in prison. He is currently incarcerated at Clinton Correctional Facility in Clinton County, New York.